This bone density, an ancient warrior?
No, an average 3,000-year-old farmer.
And their skeleton beats a modern Olympian?
That's the part that should scare you.
Dig up an ancient human skeleton, and it looks like it belonged to an athlete. Bone density that beats most modern Olympians. Muscle attachment sites so pronounced researchers can practically see how strong someone was 3,000 years after they died. And these aren't the remains of elite hunters or warriors selected for strength. They're ordinary people. Farmers, foragers, elders. Somehow, a species that invented neither the gym nor running shoes ended up in better shape than a species that has both. The answer isn't more exercise. It's something almost the opposite. Start with a distinction most people miss entirely. Exercise, the modern version, is deliberate. You schedule it, you do it, then you stop and spend the rest of the day sitting. Ancient humans didn't have exercise. They had physical activity that never turned off. Walking to find food, carrying water and firewood and children, climbing, digging, squatting to check the ground. It wasn't a session. It was the entire day, every day, for an entire lifetime. The clearest evidence comes from the Hadza, a foraging community in Tanzania, whose lifestyle is the closest living match to how most of human history was actually lived. Hadza men cover 15 to 19 kilometers a day while foraging. Women cover 9 to 12. That's not a workout. That's an ordinary Tuesday. And it's not flat, even, sidewalk walking either. It's over roots and slopes and loose ground, constantly changing direction and pace. Squat down to read a track, climb to reach fruit, crouch to move through brush, straighten up to scan the horizon. Add in carrying loads, food, tools, kids, and you get a movement pattern that recruits far more of the body in far more directions than a treadmill session ever will. Here's the part that surprises people most. This constant, moderate movement may have done more for ancient bodies than an intense workout could have. Hard exercise spikes cortisol and adrenaline, and the fitness gain comes from recovering afterward. That's real, and it works. But it's not the main event. Continuous low to moderate activity is actually the primary trigger for things like new mitochondria growing inside muscle cells, which is the foundation of metabolic health and insulin sensitivity. It's the main driver of resting heart rate and arterial flexibility. And it's the signal that maintains bone density across the entire skeleton, not just the specific bones a workout happens to load. This shows up in modern research too, and it's a little uncomfortable. Studies on non-exercise physical activity, the incidental walking, standing, and moving that happens outside of a workout, consistently find it matters as much for health outcomes as formal exercise, sometimes more. People who move throughout the day but never set foot in a gym often show better insulin sensitivity and better cardiovascular markers than people who exercise for an hour and then sit for the other 23. Sitting for 8 hours and exercising for 1 is physiologically worse than never exercising and never sitting still either. The gym hour doesn't cancel out the rest of the day. This pattern starts in childhood. Kids in traditional societies, and in most of human history before the 20th century, spent nearly all of their free time running, climbing, wrestling, and carrying. Not organized sport, just unstructured outdoor play. That loading during growth builds the bone density and cardiovascular baseline that carries into adulthood, because bone is most responsive to stress exactly during those years. Swap that out for screens and car rides, and you get a generation of adults whose skeletons and hearts never received the developmental stimulus ancient children got, automatically. It even changes the brain. Sustained moderate movement triggers a protein called BDNF, which supports the growth of new neurons, especially in the part of the brain responsible for memory and learning. Ancient humans were producing it constantly, all day, just by living. Modern sedentary life barely produces it at all. One more reason chronic sitting is linked to faster cognitive decline, not just worse cardiovascular health. One more casualty of modern life: posture variety. We spend our resting hours in one position, hips bent at 90 degrees, spine curved forward, for years on end. Ancient humans rotated through squatting, kneeling, and sitting on the ground with legs crossed or extended. The full deep squat in particular, heels flat, hips below the knees, shows up across forager and traditional societies worldwide, and it preserves hip, ankle, and spinal mobility that sitting in a chair slowly erodes. Nobody needed a mobility routine when ordinary life already demanded the full range of motion. So where does that leave modern exercise? Not useless, genuinely valuable actually. It provides real strength, cardio, and metabolic gains that continuous moderate activity alone won't fully produce. But it was built to compensate for a problem modern life created, and it was never designed to replace an entire day of movement. It can't. The ancient human wasn't training for anything. They were just living a life that required their body to work. and 10,000 years later, their skeletons are still proving it.